In a small, impoverished village, two children, Arav and Nisha, lived with their parents, who struggled to provide for them. The family often went to bed hungry, and the children dreamed of a better life. One day, after a particularly harsh meal, Arav and Nisha decided they could no longer endure their circumstances. They planned to escape and seek work in the nearby city, hoping to find jobs that would provide food and a way to support their family. Upon arriving in the bustling city, the siblings were overwhelmed by its vastness and chaos. They quickly realized that finding jobs would be much harder than they anticipated. Days turned into weeks, and despite their relentless efforts, they faced rejection after rejection. To survive, they took up menial jobs, working long hours for little pay. They lived in a cramped, dilapidated room, often skipping meals just to save enough money to stay afloat. The city's bright lights began to dim for them, replaced by the harsh reality of their situation. Back in their village, the king ruled with an iron fist. His greed and desire for power knew no bounds. When he learned about the plight of Arav and Nisha's family, he ordered the parents to pay higher taxes, driving them deeper into poverty. Unable to bear the pressure, the parents were taken away and executed under false accusations of rebellion. The news reached Arav and Nisha through whispers in the city, igniting a fire of anger and grief in there. With their newfound power, Arav and Nisha led a revolt against the king's forces. They used their knowledge of the land and the loyalty of their followers to launch a series of surprise attacks, crippling the king's strongholds. The kingdom trembled as the siblings fought bravely, their hearts driven by the desire for justice. After months of conflict, their newfound power, Arav and Nisha led a revolt against the king's forces. They used their knowledge of the land and the loyalty of their followers to launch a series of surprise attacks, crippling the king's strongholds. The kingdom trembled as the siblings fought bravely, their hearts driven by the desire for justice. After months of conflict, they finally reached the castle. With the king dead, Arav and Nisha were hailed as heroes. They established a new order, vowing to rebuild the kingdom with justice and compassion. However, as they began to govern, tensions arose between them. Arav, who believed in a more democratic approach, often clashed with Nisha, who was more authoritarian, wanting to ensure stability at any cost. Their differing visions for the kingdom began to sow seeds of distrust and resentment. As time passed, Arav grew increasingly wary of Nisha's ambition. He feared that her desire for control would lead to a new form of tyranny. In secret, he plotted to remove her from power, believing it was the only way to save the kingdom. Nisha, sensing Arav's growing unease, decided to confront him. Their sibling bond, once unbreakable, began to fray as secrets and suspicions surfaced. In a final confrontation, the siblings faced each other in the same throne room, where they had once stood united against the king. Betrayal hung in the air as they drew their weapons. A fierce battle ensued, filled with emotions and memories of their shared childhood. In a tragic twist, Arav, driven by desperation and fear, struck Nisha down. As she lay dying, she whispered words of forgiveness, urging him to remember their parents' legacy. Arav stood alone in the throne room, the weight of his actions crashing down on him. With Nisha gone, he had achieved his ambition to rule the kingdom, but at an unimaginable cost. Haunted by the memory of his sister and the betrayal that had led to her demise, Arav vowed to govern with wisdom and compassion, forever carrying the burden of guilt. He knew that the cycle of violence and revenge had claimed not only their parents, but also the bond he had shared with Nisha. In the end, he ruled the kingdom, but the